So if a spider is this large, I don't know, that your car's probably just going to crumple into a tin can if you run into this thing.
Exactly.
This is J'Ba Fofi, a giant spider cryptid that is said to dwell deep within the Congolese forests.
There is a section of the Congo rainforest that experienced guides refuse to enter after dark. Not because of superstition, not because of snakes or leopards, or any of the documented predators that make this jungle one of the most dangerous places on Earth. They refuse because of something that moves through the canopy without sound, something that has been doing exactly that for longer than recorded human history. The local Baka people have a name for it. They do not say that name out loud after sunset. You will understand why by the end of this. The J'Ba Fofi is described as a giant spider with a leg span stretching over 4 feet. Brown body, purple markings on the legs, webs thick enough to stop a machete. Every expedition that came back with evidence of this creature had that evidence buried, confiscated, or dismissed before it reached a scientific journal. For almost a century, mainstream science called it a legend, a campfire story. Then someone ran a DNA test on silk recovered from a massive web structure deep in the Congo basin. The results came back, and the lead researcher stood up and walked to the other side of the room without saying a word. That test revealed 3 separate biological anomalies that do not exist in any known spider species on Earth. Not 1, 3. This is the full story of the J'Ba Fofi and why the Congo has been keeping this secret for a very long time. The night 3 men disappeared, the earliest documented encounter that Western records preserved, happened in 1938 near the Ituri forest in what was then the Belgian Congo. A group of missionaries traveling between outposts came across something on the jungle trail that stopped them completely. Stretched across the path at roughly 8 feet high was a web unlike anything any of them had seen in years of working in that region. These were not the thin, translucent threads you brush off your face walking through a doorway. These were thick, white, rope-like strands woven so densely that you would need a blade just to push through. The silk was anchored to massive trees on both sides and extended back into the forest further than any of them could see. One of the men reached forward and touched the web with a heavy walking stick. The force of the vibration that came back through the stick made him drop it immediately. They could feel it from several feet away. They made camp nearby. 3 men were gone before sunrise. No screams, no sounds of struggle. Their tents were standing. Their belongings were untouched. Their boots were arranged neatly beside their sleeping rolls, as if whatever came for them lifted them straight out of sleep, without disturbing a single thing around them. The only evidence left behind was a set of drag marks in the soft mud, leading away from the camp into the thickest part of the forest. A man named Robert Hale had seen what happened. He was found at dawn pressed against a tree trunk, shaking so severely that his companions assumed fever. He could not speak for 2 full days. When he finally found his voice, he described a shadow descending from the canopy. Enormous. Deliberate. Moving between the sleeping men with a precision that suggested it knew exactly where each one was before it descended. Slow like a machine being lowered by crane. Utterly silent. He said it took his companions one by one, and they never woke up. Colonial officers wrote it off as malarial hallucination. They closed the file. But here is what those same officers did next. They collected samples of that silk from the campsite and shipped them to a scientific archive in Europe, where they were sealed away for decades. Think about that. They called the man delusional and then quietly preserved his evidence. Those silk samples sat in a museum basement for over 80 years. Robert Hale never recovered from that night. He returned to England, and every light in his house burned until he died in 1987. His grandson said Hale spoke about it only once, decades later, and said the spider knew they were there the whole time. It was deciding. The soldier and the purple silk. A few years later, in the early 1940s, a Belgian soldier named Corporal D staggered out of the jungle in a state of complete psychological collapse. His uniform was coated in a sticky substance with a distinctive purple tint. His legs were entirely paralyzed. He could not move them for over 10 hours after he was recovered. Physicians found traces of a venom compound in his bloodstream that matched nothing in any medical database they had access to. The compound caused full motor paralysis while keeping the victim completely conscious. You could not move, you could not scream, but you could feel everything happening to you. Consider what that means from the perspective of a predator. A venom that immobilizes but does not knock out the prey keeps the meal alive and fresh. It is not an accident of chemistry, it is a design. The Belgian military sealed off that section of forest for 6 months after recovering that soldier. No public explanation was ever given. His records were classified. He was transferred out of the Congo and spent the rest of his life in a medical facility in Brussels, waking at night and describing legs in the darkness. He died without ever receiving an accurate diagnosis because the accurate diagnosis was classified information that the Belgian military had decided the world was not ready to hear. That sealed forest, that silence, that classified file. This is a pattern you are going to see repeated throughout this entire story. Every time someone gets close to hard evidence of the J'Ba Fofi, the evidence disappears and the person is discredited. The machinery that keeps this secret running has been operating for a very long time. The people who already knew. Here is the part of this story that should make you genuinely uncomfortable about how modern science has treated indigenous knowledge. While Western researchers were dismissing eyewitness accounts as fever dreams and classifying military incidents, the Baka and Mbudi communities who have lived in the Congo Basin for thousands of years were operating with a level of precise, detailed, generationally tested knowledge about this animal that no university had come close to matching. They do not treat the J'Ba Fofi like mythology. They treat it the way anyone with survival instincts treats a large apex predator, with specific rules that are followed without exception. They do not speak the creature's name after sundown, not because of superstition, because the J'Ba Fofi detects vibrations over extremely long distances. Human voices create vibrations. Speaking in darkness tells a predator that hunts through sensitivity to ground and air movement exactly where you are standing. This is not a cultural tradition. It is a survival protocol. Hunters avoid paths where the forest goes completely silent. In a healthy section of the Congo rainforest, there is constant noise. Birds, insects, frogs, primates, competing for sound space. When that sound stops entirely, the Baka know what it means. Every creature in the vicinity has gone still to avoid detection. Silence in this forest is not peace. It is a warning. It means something large and patient is nearby and watching. Villagers leave offerings of meat beneath specific old trees. They are consistent that this is not worship. It is a negotiation. They are telling the spider there is easier food available so it does not need to hunt the village. Elders who have spoken to researchers say that when this arrangement is disrupted by outsiders who do not understand it, people start going missing. And these elders have helped bury what was left of those people. The most important thing to understand here is this. Western science spent decades calling these communities uneducated, superstitious, and unreliable. Every single detail they described about the J'Ba Fofi was later confirmed by physical evidence, chemical analysis, and genetic testing. They were the real experts from the beginning. They always were. The web that dissolved skin. A trained arachnologist named Thomas Avery spent 23 years studying spider behavior and published over 40 peer-reviewed papers before he decided to do what no credentialed scientist had been willing to do. He went into the Congo with the specific intention of finding physical evidence of the J'Ba Fofi. He brought a local guide named Inoshi, who had grown up near the forbidden zones and who warned Avery 4 separate times to turn back before they found what they were looking for. Deep in the forest interior, they found a web nearly 10 feet wide. Avery's machete blade bounced off when he tried to cut through it. He had to use a specialized saw just to get a sample. When he tested that sample back at camp, what he found stopped him cold. The protein chains in the silk were reinforced with minerals absorbed from the soil, creating a biological material stronger than steel and more elastic than anything currently manufactured by human industry. This was not spider silk as science understood it. This was an engineered structural material produced by a living organism. Inside the web, he found bird bones and the remains of a small antelope. The bones had been snapped into clean sections, which meant whatever built this trap had physical strength far beyond any known arachnid. But the detail that genuinely disturbed him was a scrap of fabric caught in the lower section of the web. It looked like part of a human shirt. It was partially dissolved, still dissolving. The silk was coated in active digestive enzymes. The moment you touch the web, you are not just trapped. You are already being consumed. You do not need to wait for the spider to reach you. The web does the first part of the work on its own. Avery also identified a heavy sweet scent in the air around the web. He ran it through a chemical sensor. It was a pheromone compound with documented sedative properties on mammalian neurochemistry. It slows your thinking. It confuses your sense of direction. It makes you unaware of the shadow moving toward you through the canopy. By the time you can smell it, you are already inside the trap. This is not instinct. This is a coordinated biological system built by something that has had an extraordinarily long time to perfect it. The colony beneath the ground. Avery followed disturbed earth further into the forest to a place where enormous trees had collapsed inward, their root systems torn from the ground in a pattern that did not match wind damage or disease. At the center of this collapse was a hole in the ground roughly the diameter of a large truck tire. Its edges lined with thick white silk that had the texture and sheen of industrial plastic. Inoshi refused to go down. Avery went anyway. This is the decision that changed everything. The temperature started rising immediately. Not geothermal heat, biological heat. The ambient warmth generated by a very large number of living bodies concentrated in an enclosed space. The air was thick with that sweet, disorienting scent. When Avery activated his light, what he saw is still the most disturbing documented field observation in the history of large arachnid research. The ceiling was covered in silk sacks the size of pumpkins. Egg sacks, dozens of them, some sealed, some already open. Moving across every surface, walls, ceiling, floor, were spiders the size of dinner plates. Juveniles, moving in organized patterns that did not scatter when the light hit them. They circled. They adjusted. They communicated through low-frequency vibrations, pulsing through the ground, thumping rhythmically in a frequency Avery could feel through the soles of his boots. This was not a solitary predator hiding from the world. This was a colony. The J'Ba Fofi was not one animal. It was an operation. The floor was covered in remains, bones arranged in groupings along the walls, animal remains stacked in organized sections. And in one part of the tunnel that Avery later described as the hardest thing he ever made himself look at directly, there were human belongings. A boot, a camera lens, a section of canvas backpack belonging to an explorer who had gone missing 5 years earlier. The younger spiders circling Avery were already 3 feet wide, and they were not attacking, they were assessing. Testing, waiting. This was not instinct. This was strategy. These creatures were making calculated decisions in real time and communicating those decisions to each other through the ground beneath Avery's feet. He barely got out. His guide pulled him up through the entrance as the deeper adults began moving toward them through the tunnels. The cover-up that confirms everything. What happened after Avery surfaced is in some ways more disturbing than what he found underground. He returned to base camp with footage, soil samples, and biological material that he believed would permanently end the scientific debate about the J'Ba Fofi. He was completely right about what he had found. He was completely wrong about what would happen to it. His hard drives had been wiped, not corrupted, wiped with a systematic completeness that requires deliberate technical skill and physical access to the equipment. Every photograph, every video file, every audio recording from the entire expedition was gone. His physical samples had been replaced with ordinary dirt and leaves. His satellite phone had been remotely disabled. He had no way to call for help and no evidence left of anything he had seen. Within hours, men in unmarked uniforms arrived at his camp. They did not ask if he was injured. They did not ask what he had found. They told him he was being expelled from the country for undisclosed environmental violations he had never been notified of. They took his journals. They took his cameras. They took the clothes he had worn into the tunnel. He was left with nothing except his memory. Avery spent the next 15 years attempting to return to the Congo. Every single permit application was denied. Every funding request rejected, someone with access to institutional channels at a level Avery could never identify had made a decision that this information was not going to reach the public. The cover-up was not amateur. It was coordinated, resourced, and ongoing. But here's the question that nobody has answered. Someone was already waiting at that base camp before Avery had radioed that he was coming back. Someone knew where he was going before he got there. Someone made the decision to erase his evidence before he even surfaced from that tunnel. Who made that call? Who has been making that call every time someone gets close? Because this was not the first time. The Belgian military sealed a section of forest in the 1940s and never explained it. Colonial officers quietly archived silk samples they publicly called worthless. A government deported a credentialed scientist and erased his evidence. At every point in this story, the pattern is the same. Someone knows. And whatever they know is worth a great deal of effort to keep buried. What the DNA finally confirmed. The silk samples that Robert Hale's dismissive colonial officers quietly archived in a European museum basement were finally tested decades later. When the sequence finished loading and the results appeared on screen, the lead researcher reportedly walked to the other side of the room and stood there for a while before speaking. The silk contained genetic material consistent with a creature carrying ancient biological markers, sequences associated with lineages that science believed had been extinct for tens of millions of years. Robert Hale was not hallucinating. He witnessed a hunt and survived it. The data made that undeniable. The full DNA test on organic material recovered from an active J'Ba Fofi web structure returned 3 anomalies. First, the sequence contained protein coding segments normally found only in vertebrate animals, the biological mechanism behind bone and dense armor. A spider should not have this. No spider has ever had this. But this one does, and it uses it to reinforce its exoskeleton with minerals pulled directly from its environment. This is why every eyewitness describes the body of this creature as looking unnaturally dense, more like carved plated armor than anything biological. Second, the aging markers in the DNA indicate a metabolic clock running at a fraction of the speed of any known arachnid. Conservative estimates place the lifespan of this creature somewhere between 40 and 60 years. 60 years of learning the geography of its territory. 60 years of mapping the movement patterns of every animal that passes through. 60 years of perfecting a hunt. Third, the sequence contains what geneticists call a null segment, a section of the genetic chain that simply stops and then restarts with nothing connecting them. This happens when a lineage diverged from the rest of its evolutionary family so long ago that no living reference specimen exists close enough to fill in the gap. In plain language, the J'Ba Fofi is not related to any living spider in any traceable way. It is the last surviving member of a family tree that the rest of the world stopped adding to a very long time ago. The researchers who ran this sequence stared at the null segment for a long time before anyone typed the conclusion into the notes. Then someone deleted it. Then typed it again. What the sequence showed was not a new species. It was something older than the concept of species as we understand it. And the creature that produced that DNA is alive right now. It has been alive for a very long time. Somewhere beneath the canopy of a forest that no satellite has fully mapped, in tunnels that no expedition has returned from intact, the colony is still there. The eggs are still hatching. And every vibration moving through the ground is telling it exactly where you are. The Baka people knew this before any laboratory confirmed it. They have known it for generations. The question was never whether the J'Ba Fofi existed. The question was whether the rest of the world was ready to listen to the people who never forgot. If you want to watch videos like this, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.